What's the most legendary work meltdown you've seen? My PE teacher in the 9th grade got fired for this crap. She tells us to walk laps around the school for cardio day. Some kids decided to run and managed to finish 3 laps by the time the rest of us finished like 2. When we finish our second lap, we see the runners sitting, and the teacher just scream, "Get your goddamn puny butts over here." She proceeds to push the whole class onto the track in 97-degree weather and makes us sprint a mile and says that anybody who gets below 7:30 has to run it again. It was a 90-minute period. Everybody finishes, and she sits us down and calls us a multitude of bad words, and tells us that we should have finished 3 laps like they did instead of only 2, even though she told us to walk, not run, and they were running. The whole time we noticed that a girl isn't here anymore. We later found out she had to be taken away in an ambulance because she had asthma and our B.O.V.A. teacher denied her of her inhaler, so she fainted and was taken to the nurse's office immediately. I worked at Taco Bell while in high school. One of my co-workers was this guy who was really friendly, but also really strange. He was obsessed with being a straight edge kid and drew the X's on his hands, and the whole 9 yards. He had a high-pitched, but pleasant voice, and spoke in an overly polite manner. Anyway, he had put in his 2 weeks and on his last day he was working the front counter register. This lady walks up to order and he just stares at her. After a few seconds she says, "Can you take my order?" In his very calm and polite voice he says, "Oh, I am sorry ma'am, but I cannot." There was another awkward pause and she says, "Well, why not?" He responds with, "Because I am a dinosaur." He immediately started growling and roaring at her, and he walked back and forth behind the counter like a T-Rex. He did this until the GM, who was back making food, realized what was going on. On her way up to the counter he calmly clocked out and left. The GM had to apologize over and over again to the poor woman trying to order. That kid was a Taco Bell legend for several years. I wasn't there to see it, but my co-workers have talked about the cabinet incident. Last year was my first year of teaching, and I was working in a low-income inner city school. People kept saying to me, "There's no way you could possibly be worse than the last girl we had." When I asked what they meant, I was told that a few years prior the principal had hired a first-year teacher. Apparently one day she got so overwhelmed and upset by the behavior of her class that she chucked a ream of paper out the window and then ran into the back room, shut herself in a big cabinet and cried. Her class was unsupervised for a while. Apparently none of the kids had told anyone what happened, and when the principal found her, she was curled up on the floor of the cabinet, rocking back and forth and sobbing. Clearly, she was fired soon after that. I didn't stay at that school longer than a year because the principal was the equivalent of Satan. But when I left she said to me, "Despite all the crap you were put through this year from your kids, you're the first teacher I can remember who I never saw cry at school." I'll take that as a compliment, I suppose. I cried when I was teaching because the students were throwing things at my head during break and I realized I was putting up with more than I should. Writing financial software in the 80s. The systems analyst sitting at her desk near me suddenly burst into tears and wailed, "It's all so pointless. Money doesn't mean anything." This happened only a couple of days ago at my work. I didn't see it, but everyone's been talking about it. Apparently girl A came up behind girl B and slapped her on the hard hat and said, "Learn how to do your frickin' job." And girl B just frickin' lost her crap and went full UFC on girl A. Chokehold, face punches, regular choking. Girl A tried defending herself with various building parts as weapons. Both are now fired, but I don't really blame girl B. Girl A is a freaking annoying B and has been pushing everyone's nerves since she started, and I wouldn't want someone like that walking around treating co-workers that way. Someone was bound to take her down a peg eventually. The worst thing is I can already imagine the posts on girl A's Facebook about how unfair it was that she was packed and she has no idea why her workplace picks on her, telling everyone she knows a very victimized version of the story. Fellow pool guy threw a table into the pool we were cleaning. Apparently he got a text from his cousin that he was borrowing his N64. My boss was pretty tightly wrapped. One day I came into the restroom and there she was in a stall smearing her poop on the floor. I recognized her rings, and muttering. When she was finished, she cleaned up the worst of it off the floor, somehow got dressed with her icky hands, got washed, and went back to work. New hire in her first week rubs co-workers the wrong way, acting as though she's the hottest thing to hit our restaurant since food itself. When told her schedule for the next day, she argued with the manager about her availability. Threats of litigation start coming out of nowhere. She approaches two police officers who are trying to enjoy their meal completely in tears, breaking down and begging them to arrest our manager for firing her unjustly. They helped escort her out of the building. This guy in a restaurant kitchen got in a fist fight with a younger guy, punched him in the face, backed up, started shaking his face and doing the Scooby-Doo voice. He was nuts. I broke it up and took the other guy out of the kitchen to separate them and came back 10 minutes later and the crazy guy had perfectly cleaned his area, like freaking spotless, and clocked out early and never returned. Never seen or heard from him. Never picked up his last paycheck. Weirdest crap I've ever seen. When you say Scooby-Doo voice, I just imagined him giving him a quick jab and saying rah-rah raggy while in a boxing stance. 9th grade, my English teacher had a breakdown in front of the class. Kept silent but started crying whilst writing on the overhead projector her complaints about the disrespectful kids in her class. I had a co-worker freak out on a customer at Walmart. I used to be a cashier, and people used to tend to treat us like crap. Anyway, the lady got pissy because she couldn't price match some Doritos because it was the wrong size or something. Anyway, it escalates. We can't find the CSM and a few minutes later they are screaming at each other. The cashier's parting words were, "I ain't fricking price matching your Doritos. You don't even need those Doritos, with your fat ass." Needless to say, that was her last day. Had a customer try to price match Great Value chips for some godforsaken reason. You can't price match Walmart at Walmart, dumbass. When I was an intern, we had a high priority project come through that my mentor was working on. Really fast turnaround with many late nights, shitty coffee, and good beer. Anyway, it was towards the end of the project and I was finishing bring up on the board at my bench when I heard him muttering quietly to himself. I looked up to see if he needed me and watched him absolutely pound a computer monitor with his fist, then grab it, smash it down on the floor before stomping on it screaming, "There's no goddamn DRC error, you fricking S." He calmed down after a bit, got a beer, then requested a new monitor. That's when I learned that no matter how mad you are, screaming at Altium will not make your sleep deprivation better. I love how he called it S. First, this involves the new £5 notes. For those who don't know, they're polymer notes, and if you fold them up they tend to stay folded. It's important for the story. I served a customer, a friendly old man with white hair, who paid with a folded £5. I put it in the till. A few minutes later my boss was in the till and saw the folded note. He decided that the folds meant it had been rolled up into a tube to snort coke with. He was absolutely adamant. I said no, I just took that note from an old man. He started yelling, rolling the note up in his fingers to make a tube, shouting at me, "Look, it rolls up like this. Don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't tell me I'm wrong." He kept shouting at me, basically waiting for me to apologize and back down, say I was wrong, but I wasn't, so I didn't. He wound up storming off, throwing things and slamming things. He's freaking insane and I should have complained, but there would be no point. Everyone knows what he's like and no one cares. Don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't tell me I'm wrong. At this point I'm imagining your boss is Lucy from Peanuts. Not too legendary, but she was screaming and throwing crap because she got caught smoking in the parking lot after causing drama non-stop the past few months. Her extremely sunburned, overweight, shirtless father burst into the store threatening management if they don't give her job back. I was in court, lawyer, and we were arguing a motion and requesting sanctions against plaintiff's attorney. The judge starts talking and dressing down the plaintiff's attorney, who, now offended, decided it would be a great idea to interrupt the judge, insult the judge, and flat out told him you were too stupid to make it in private practice and you do not know what the frick you are doing. She had been licensed for all of 3 years. She is no longer licensed. A guy I delivered pizza with had his parking spot taken by a guy he hated. He pulled out a giant monkey wrench out of his trunk and smoked him in the back of the head with it. Knocked him out. Yeah, he got arrested and fired. Well, that escalated quickly, from irritated to attempted homicide. I worked in IT and one guy, who was one of the most chilled guys I knew, was responsible for the deployment, updates and maintenance of a specific project that generated high revenue. One afternoon I was sitting at my desk and just heard a big crash and saw one of his 3 monitors on the floor. He stood up, shoved the next monitor over the divider onto the next section's desk, then swiped the 3rd monitor off the other side, picked up his keyboard and smashed it as hard as he could, kicked his chair away and slowly and calmly walked out the department without saying a word. He came back to work the next day as if nothing happened. Everyone knew the pressure he was under and was very good at his job, so nobody said a thing. LOL, I want that kind of job security. Guy who's hard of hearing had to blast the radio. Another guy gets sick of complaining to a dickless manager who does nothing, so he silently rips it off the cubicle and smashes it on the floor, which is not carpet, and hard, really freaking hard, like the dang thing killed his grandmother, with a look of silent but unfathomable rage on his face like Hugh Jackman coming out of the water or whatever in that Wolverine origin movie. It explodes. All the guts capacitors, coils, resistors, transistors, circuit board etc go flying. And then as people are gasping and screaming he just sighs, satisfied. I pretended to be horrified but I was so happy inside. I'm imagining a clueless almost deaf guy shedding a single tear after seeing his radio smashed. He never heard anyone complain before and thought life was peachy until co-worker went apeshit. In high school I worked at a grocery store and this kid was all pee off at another bagger and swearing in front of the customers. He said he was hoping he'd get fired. I told him he should quit before he gets fired so that it would look better on his resume in the future. A few minutes later I realized he was missing. Then suddenly he comes around the corner from the manager's office, no longer in uniform. He threw his uniform in the trash in front of the manager. Then he looked at me and said loudly, "I took your advice," then proceeded to walk across the front end, point to each associate saying "frick you" to each of them and walked out. Everyone was staring at me after and I said I did not tell him to do that. Frick you, frick you, frick you, you're cool, frick you, I'm out. I once worked with a guy on salary, whose availability was clearly abused, who used to joke that he just wouldn't come in tomorrow. Then one day he didn't come in. In fact, no one could figure out where he was. Turned out he moved states and got a new job and just didn't bother telling his boss until he was already long gone. Good on him. It was a call center and probably 80 people were working at the time. All of our cubicles are on the same floor. She sends an email to our boss and CCs the entire office. Something along the lines of "frick this place, frick the boss, frick the break room, basically frick everything and your family." Then the last line, "Oh yeah, I left my badge on my desk." I work in a call center. I hate my job and would love to do something like that when I leave, but I will only put in my notice and leave peacefully. You have been visited by the doggo accountant. Comment account balance to get a balance and positive personal economy. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.